going to go through some of the problems on your review to try to help you in preparing. I may skip some for time purposes, but we'll go through most of these. So, simplify square root of 150. So remember that to simplify a square root that isn't a perfect square, you would break it down into a prime factor tree. So 150 can be broken up into 15 and 10. 15 is 3 and 5. 10 is 5 and 2. And then since it's a square root, you're looking for pairs. So we have a pair of 5s. That's going to be what comes out of the radical. And then whatever is left by itself without a pair is going to go back under the radical. And you multiply them back together. So 3 times 2 is 6. So 5 square root of 6 is the simplified version of the square root of 150. So that's the answer for number 1. For number 2, we have the square root of negative 216. So first thing I would do is make note of this negative under the radical. So that's going to come out as an I. Then I would do the factor tree for the 216. So 216 is even, so I'm going to go ahead and divide it by 2. So that'll be 2 and 108. 108 is even, so I'm going to divide it by 2. So that's 54. 54 is 9 times 6. And 9 is 3 times 3. And 6 is 3 times 2. So again, it's a square root, so I'm looking for pairs. I have a pair of 2s, a pair of 3s, and then a leftover 3 and a leftover 2. So the pair of 2s comes out as a 2, and the pair of 3s comes out as a 3, so that's a 6 on the outside, and then a leftover 3 times a leftover 2 is a 6 on the inside. So this one is going to be 6i square root 6. All right, number 3, similar to those. Number 4, the shortest leg of a triangle is 4 feet shorter than the other leg. The hypotenuse, okay, so this means, since this is a hypotenuse, it means you have a right triangle. So I'm going to draw a diagram. So the shortest leg is 4 feet shorter than the other leg. The hypotenuse is 20 feet. What are the lengths of the two legs of this triangle? Okay, so we're going to use the formula a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are legs and c is the hypotenuse. So this will be x squared plus x minus 4 squared, and c is 20, so 20 squared. So this is x squared. X minus 4 squared means we have to write it down twice and FOIL it or multiply it out. So that'll be x squared minus 4x plus 16. So plus x squared, these will combine into minus 8x plus 16 is equal to, I believe 20 squared is 400. Okay, I'm going to erase this scratch work since I don't have a lot of room. Like terms, I have these 2x squares, so 2x squared minus 8x plus 16 is equal to 400. Now I want to set it equal to 0 since it's a quadratic equation. So I'll have 2x squared minus 8x minus, negative 400 plus 16 is negative 384 equals 0. And now I can divide everything by 2. So that's going to give me x squared minus 4x. 384 divided by 2 is 192. Okay, so now we can either factor this or we can use the quadratic formula. So I'm going to see if it'll factor. So I'm going to try to make a chart. I need it to multiply to negative 192 and add to negative 4. So 1 and 192. This says the signs are different. and this says the bigger number is negative. So I'm going to put negative with the 192. 192 divided by 2 is 96, so 2 and negative 96. 192 divided by 3 is 64. 192 divided by 4 is 48. So I'm just making my chart to see what works. 192 is not divisible by 5. It is divisible by 6. Whoops, 6 and 32. Let's see if it's divisible by 7. Nope. Check 8. Yes. So 8 and negative 24. Let's check 9. It's not divisible by 10. Let's try 11. So I'm literally just trying every number to make sure I don't miss a number. I tried 12. I get 16. And that one's going to be what works, right? 12 and negative 16 is negative 4. So this will factor. So I'm going to factor this into x plus 12, x minus 16, and then I can solve for each of those factors. So x plus 12 equals 0 is going to give me x is negative 12, and x minus 16 equals 0 is going to be x equals 16. Since this is talking about the length of something, you can't have a negative length, so this one is not a valid answer, so it needs to be 16. So the shortest leg is this one, and this is the other leg. So the other leg is what we just found. It's 16. And then if we plug in 16 here, 16 minus 4 is 12. So the shortest leg is 12 feet. Okay. Let's look at the next problem. One side of a rectangle is 4 miles longer than 4 times the other side. The area of the rectangle is 288 square miles. Find the length of the shorter side. So this is actually very similar to what we just did. I'll go ahead and draw the picture. So we have one side of a rectangle is 4 miles longer than 4 times the other side. Okay, so 4 miles longer than 4 times the other side. So the other side is just x. Remember that area equals length times width. So we have 288 is equal to x times 4x plus 4. And then we'll solve this problem. So we would distribute the x. So 288 equals 4x squared plus 4x. We would want it set equal to 0. So we would have 4x squared plus 4x minus 288 equals 0. I think we could divide by 4. I always like to divide by the number in front if it's evenly divisible, because then my numbers are smaller, so it's easier to work with. So that would give us x squared plus x minus 72 equals 0. And then this one will factor. So 9 times 8 is 72. I want the larger number to be positive, so it'll factor into x plus 9, x minus 8. And then I just set each of these factors equal to 0 and solve. So I have negative 9 and 8. Again, the negative's not valid because we're talking about lengths. So x is 8. So it says find the length of the shorter side. Well, that's what we just found. So the answer here is 8. All right, number 6. Phyllis invested $52,000, a portion earning a simple interest rate of 4% per year, and the rest earning a rate of 7% per year. After 1 year, the total interest earned on those investments was $2,440. How much money did she invest at each rate? Okay, so here is a way to organize this information. So you have the amount you're investing is $52,000, and you're investing it in 2 accounts. So we don't know how much we're investing in each account, which is the whole point of this problem. So let's say I invested X dollars. Well, let's use a dollar amount. Let's say I invested $2,000 in this first account. Then how would I find how much I invested in this other account? Well, I would subtract the total minus 2,000, and that would be 50,000. So these two totals, these two must add up to the total at the top. So knowing that, let's see what we get here. Knowing that, if we don't know what this is, we do know that we subtract in order to find the other part. So it's always X and then the total minus X on the other side. And then we're going to have an interest rate for each part. So this one we'll say is 4%. This one will let be 7%. And it doesn't matter which is which. You just assign one to each side. Okay, so to find your equation, your interest is just multiplying those two together and multiplying these together, because that's going to be the interest for each one. So this is going to be 0.04x. Remember that you have to change the percent to a decimal format. So that's the interest earned on that side. The interest earned on this side is 0.07 times 52,000 minus x. So if you add those interests up, you set it equal to how much they said the total interest was, which was $24.40. And then you solve from there. So 0.07, we're going to distribute that. So 0.07 times 52,000 is 3640. So this is going to be 0.04x plus 3640. Whoops, not plus. Minus 0.07x is equal to 2440. So now we would add our like terms. So we get negative 0.03x plus 3640 is equal to 2440. Subtract the 3640. So we would get negative 0.03x is equal to 2440 minus 3640 is negative 1200. Divide by negative 0.03. And I get 40,000. Okay, so one of the accounts we invested 40,000 in. We're going to figure out which one by going back to our chart. X is 40,000. The one on the left was the 40,000, and notice I associated that with 4%. So at 4%, I invested 40,000. To find the amount I invested at 7%, I would simply plug 40,000 in on the other side, and I would see that I would get 12,000. So 12,000 is invested at 7%. So hopefully this organization method may help you for these type of problems. Okay. Number 7, solve the equation. Okay, so let's work on this one. We've got negative 14, and on the right side, we want to multiply these out. So we'll have x squared plus 13x plus 4x plus 52. We see that we have an x squared, so it is a quadratic. So we need to move everything to the same side and set it equal to 0. First, I'm going to add up my like terms. So I'm going to have negative 14 equals x squared plus 17x plus 52. I'm going to add 14 to both sides to get a 0 on the left. So I have x squared plus 17x plus 66 equals 0. Okay, now your goal is to solve this. You can either factor it or you can use the quadratic formula. It looks like it may factor. So let's say we want it to multiply to get 66, and we want it to add to get 17. So 1 and 66, 2 and 33, 3 and 22, not 4, not 5, 6 and 11. And that's actually going to be what works right there, 6 and 11. So we would factor this into x plus 6, x plus 11, set each one equal to 0 and solve, so we get -6 and -11. So those are the two solutions, -6 and -11. Okay, let's look at number 8. Number 8, they want us to solve this equation. So here the trick is to notice that there's an x in common in all the factors. So I would start by dividing that out. So I would write down the common factor and then write down what's left in parentheses. So I'd have 10x squared plus 13x minus 3 equals 0. And now I can set each of these factors equal to 0 and work on each factor separately. So the first one is done. X equals 0 is one answer. Now I'm going to keep working on the other part. So I can factor it by multiplying this times this and seeing if it's factorable. So I would want my product to be -30 and my sum to be 13. The signs are going to need to be different. Bigger number is going to be positive. So 1 and 30, 2 and 15. And actually that's what works right there, right? -2 and 15 is positive 13. So when you have a number in front of the x squared, remember that you have to do the longer factoring method, which is factor by grouping. So you bring down the first term, you use the two numbers that you had in the chart to break apart your middle term, and you bring down the last term. And then you do factor by grouping. So what's in common with the first pair is 2x. So you write down 2x, divide that out and see what's left. So you'd have 5x minus 1. Bring down that middle sign, and then look at what you have in common with the next pair. That would be 3. So I'm going to be dividing out a 3. And you'll see you get 5x minus 1 left again. Notice that what's in parentheses is the same. That should always happen if you're doing factor by grouping. So that's one factor. And your other factor is what's in red. So you have 2x plus 3 is the other factor. And now you set each of these factors equal to 0 and solve. So you'll have x equals 1/5 and x equals, 2x plus 3 equals 0. So x will equal -3/2. So there are your three solutions. You have 0, 1/5, and -3/2. Okay, this next one, we have the product of two consecutive integers is 90. Find all such pairs of integers. You must set up an equation and solve. Okay, so product of two consecutive integers. So consecutive means one after the other. So you do x and x plus 1. It's even giving you a hint here. It's saying x equals and x plus 1 equals. So that's how you set up your problem. X times x plus 1, because it says product, is 90, so equals 90. And then you solve this equation. So you would distribute the x. So you would get x squared plus x equals 90. You would subtract 90 from both sides. You would get x squared plus x minus 90 equals 0. And then you would factor. So x plus 10x minus 9 equals 0. So that means x plus 10 equals 0, which means x equals -10. Or x minus 9 equals 0, so x is 9. So each of these is your first integer, and then your second integer would be when you add 1. So x equals 10, so that's 1. So x equals 10, and x equals 9. So you put those in for x equals. And then you find x plus 1. So negative 10 plus 1 is negative 9. 9 plus 1 is 10. And notice that the product of each of those pairs is 90. So that's your answers for those. Number 10, solve for x using the quadratic formula. So to use the quadratic formula, you need to have everything on the same side of the equal sign, set equal to 0. So we have 4x squared plus 12x plus 12 equals 0. Remember that a is always in front of x squared, so a is 4. B is always in front of x, so b is 12. And c is always the constant, the number by itself, so c is also 12. Your quadratic formula is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And now you just simply plug in the numbers. So we have negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 12 squared minus 4 times 12 all over 2 times 4. We're going to simplify what's under the radical. So we'll have negative 12 plus or minus the square root. 12 squared is 144. Minus, because there's only one negative, 4 times 12 is 192 all over 8. 144 minus 192 is negative 48. So I'll have negative 12 plus or minus the square root of negative 48 all over 8. We need to simplify that square root. The negative comes out as an I, so this is going to come out as an I. And then we need to do the prime factor tree. So 48 is 4 times 12. 4 is 2 times 2. 12 is 4 times 3. 4 is 2 times 2. So the two 2's would come out as a 4, and the 3 would stay under. So we'll have negative 12, plus or minus 4i square root 3 all over 8. And then you're looking for a heart of reducibility. Are all of those numbers reducible or divisible by the same number? Yes, I can divide them all by 4. So I would do that. So I would get negative 3 plus or minus 1, so that's just I squared of 3, all over 2. And that would be your solution set. Okay, number 11, solve the equation. This one is quadratic of form. It's not actually quadratic because the highest exponent is a 4 instead of a 2. But since the exponents are 4, 2, and then no variable, we can treat it like a quadratic. Usually in your problems, we try to pick ones that are factorable. So I would try to factor first. I mean, it's not all 100% of the time, but a lot of times. So we want the product to be 108, and the sum needs to be 21. So we have 1 and 108, and I'm just going to start dividing it by different numbers. So 108 divided by 2 is 54. 108 divided by 3 is 36. 108 divided by 4 is 27. It's not divisible by 5, but it is divisible by 6. So 6 and 18. I'm not sure if it's divisible by 7. I'll check it. Nope. Let's see if it's divisible by 8. No. See if it's divisible by 9. It is. 9 and 12. And I put 21. I meant 12. And I think that's it. So let's see, 9 plus 12 is 21, so that's the pair that I can use. So this problem factors into not plus 9 and plus 12. But since it's not x squared, it's x to the 4th, I have to split that up into x squared and x squared. So now I can set each factor equal to 0 and solve separately. So subtract 9 from both sides. We get x squared is equal to negative 9. Take the square root of both sides. Notice that negative goes under the radical. Don't forget to put plus or minus. So when you take a square root and you introduce that into the equation where it wasn't there before, you have to put plus or minus. So x equals plus or minus, the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of that negative under the radical is I. So plus or minus 3i. And then we're going to do the same thing to the other one. So subtract 12 from both sides. X squared equals negative 12. Square root both sides. Oops, don't forget the plus or minus. So x equals plus or minus 12 breaks down into 4 and 3. 4 is 2 and 2. So 2 comes out along with I. 3 stays under. So there are my 4 solutions. Remember that the degree of this original equation was a 4th power. So you're looking for 4 solutions. Here I have plus or minus 3i, that's 2. And here I have plus or minus 2i squared of 3, that's another 2. So those are my 4 solutions. Oops. Okay, let's look at number 12. So number 12, you can solve this by multiplying the left side out and then moving the 169 over. But the most efficient way is to simply use the square root property. So everything on the left-hand side is squared. So if the whole side is squared, I can undo that by taking the square root right away. So that'll give me m plus 7, because the square root undoes the square. And then the square root of 169 is 13. Don't forget to put plus or minus. So plus or minus 13. And then we just subtract 7. Okay, so here's where people make a mistake. They say 13 minus 7 is 6, and they put plus or minus 6. That is not correct. What you want to do instead is write the negative 7 plus or minus 13, and then branch this off to find your 2 answers. So one answer is going to come from negative 7 plus 13, but the other answer is going to come from negative 7 minus 13. So negative 7 plus 13 is 6, so that answer you have right, but the bottom answer is actually negative 20. So don't just add or subtract 13 minus 7 and put a plus or minus in front of it. You'd be getting one answer right and one answer wrong. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and skip equation 13. For this one, I'll just start it. You would add 13 to both sides. You would get p minus 22 squared is equal to, let's see, 183 plus 13, 196. And now you have the same setup as the one above. So you take the square root of both sides, plus or minus, and continue solving. For time, let's move on to 14. So for 14, you want to factor your the last denominator that can factor. So this actually factors into x minus 9, x minus 5. And notice that these match what you already have. We have the problem set up to where it almost always happens this way. Otherwise, these problems would be more of a nightmare than they already are. So your least common denominator, take off that highlighting. Your least common denominator is going to be the combination of different factors that you see. So your LCD is going to be the x minus 9 and the x minus 5. So usually it ends up being the one that has both factors in it. What you do is you multiply each piece, each term, in this case, each fraction, by the LCD. And you're only multiplying the numerators by that. And you're multiplying, whoops, it's a minus, each fraction by both factors in the LCD. And then you're canceling stuff out. So in the first fraction, the x minus 9's cancel, and that leaves you with a 4 times x minus 5. In the second fraction, the x minus 5's are canceling, and it leaves you with a plus x times x minus 9. And in the third fraction, the x minus 9's are canceling, and so are the x minus 5's. So you're left with just what was in the numerator originally, negative 4x plus 52. And now you can distribute. So you have 4x minus 20 plus x squared minus 9x is equal to negative 4x plus 52. Okay, so now we can rearrange this. So we have x squared minus 5x, combining my like terms, minus 20 is equal to negative 4x plus 52. I want to move everything to the same side and get it set equal to 0 because it's a quadratic equation. So this is going to be x squared minus x minus 72 equals 0. This one will factor into x minus 9, x plus 8. So now we want to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So we get 9 and negative 8. Here is where you need to be on the lookout for problems. On these fraction problems, you have to remember to check your answers. So for example, if I check 9, I want to make sure that it doesn't make any denominator 0. The easiest place to check is in the LCD. If I plug that in and it makes one of my factors 0, that means it's not a solution. So if I plug in 9, 9 minus 9 is 0. That is a problem. That means 9 is not a solution. If I plug in negative 8, this is a solution. This will not make anything 0. Notice the other thing that would make it a 0 here would be 5, because 5 minus 5 is 0. So 5 is not allowed and a 9 is not allowed. Negative 8 is fine. Okay, number 15. Plot the inequality on the given number line. Okay, so these are just write the inequality using interval notation. So I'm just going to do one part, 15 or 16. I'm just going to do one of them. Let's just do 15. So since on 15 you have a strict inequality, meaning not an equal sign under it, this is going to be an open dot. So you would put an open dot on 0. Since it's a less than, you're going to be shading to the left. Open dots are associated with parentheses. So since it goes to the left forever, your interval notation would be negative infinity. Infinity and negative infinity always get a parentheses, and it goes to 0. 16, I guess I can do it really quickly. This would be a closed dot because of the or equal to. It's still to the left. So this would be negative infinity to 0 with a bracket. Okay, I'm going to skip 17. I'm going to skip 18. 19 is a little bit different, but it's not that difficult if you know the process. So this one, you just have to look at it as a 3-part inequality. So whatever you do to one part, you have to do to all 3. So the inequality symbols is what's breaking it up into parts. The x piece is always going to be in the middle, so we're going to get everything away from the x. So we would start by adding 3, and I have to do that to all 3 parts. So if I do that, I get negative 28, and then 4x, and then 20. And again, to get the x by itself, I would divide by 4. So I would do that to all the parts. So I would have -7 is less than x is less than or equal to 5. Remember, if you divide by a negative, so if this had been a -4x, I would be dividing by negative, and it would have flipped all of my inequality symbols. So whenever you multiply or divide by a negative, don't forget that you flip your inequality symbols. In this case, we didn't. So here's our solution. X is trapped in between these numbers. So -7 would have an open circle because it's a less than. 5 would have a closed circle because it's a less than or equal to. And then you would just shade in the middle. Okay, graph, sketch the graph. So this is a special case. We have the Hoy-Vux to help you remember all the information. So horizontal line has a 0 slope, and the equation is y equals a number. V stands for, vertical line, and that has an undefined slope. And this equation is x equals a number. So if you have only a y, that corresponds to this top part because it's only a y in the equation. That means you're going to have a horizontal line. This tells you it goes through the y-axis, so you get y from here, at 2. So it goes through the y-axis at 2. Well, here's 2 on the y-axis. If it goes through that, it has to be this horizontal line, like that. So if you had only x, it would go through the x-axis, and it would be a vertical line. This one, 21, you would just simply plug these numbers in, this -5 in, and plot them on the graph once you're done. I don't have the graph up here, it cut off. I'm going to skip that one. Find the x and y intercept for the following linear equations. So remember your x-intercept, you let y be 0, and you solve. And for your y-intercept, you let x be 0 and solve. So -2x plus 7 times 0 equals -14. So -2x equals -14. Divide by -2, so x is 7. So 7, 0 is your x-intercept. And then you would do something similar for y. You would plug in 0 for x, solve, and your y-intercept would be 0, whatever number you get. And then you could graph those on your graph. When you're finding the slope of a line, you just want to pick 2 points. So let's pick this one and this one. And remember that your slope is rise over run. So if I start at this 1, I'll go up 2, and then I would go right 1. So my slope is 2 over 1, or 2. 24 is similar to one we did above, it's just with x instead. So we go to the x-axis. It's a vertical line, so that would be the line. Finding the slope, I'm going to skip that one. This one, solve this equation. The key here is making sure you multiply through by your LCD to get rid of the fraction. So if your denominators are 4 and 2, both of those go into 4. So 4 would be your LCD. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply each piece, don't forget the 8, by 4. So what happens here is the 4's cancel, and it gives me w plus 5. For the second part, it's just 8 times 4, which is 32. And for this side, 4 divided by 2 is 2. So you're really just going to be multiplying by 2. And then you would solve that equation. So distribute the 2, add your like terms. So w plus 37 equals 2w minus 8. We would subtract 2w, move it to the left, we would subtract 37 to move it to the right. So we would have negative W equals, let's see, negative 8 and negative 37 is negative 45. So that means W is positive 45. So that would be your answer. And that's a 5. Okay. Solve by the quadratic formula. We did one of those above, so I'm going to skip that one. 28. Oh, that's the last one. And it doesn't have directions. Somehow the directions got cut off. It probably said to either find the slope, which we did above, or it could have said write the equation. So let's assume it asks us to write the equation so we can see how to do that. If we're writing the equation, we need to find the slope and we need to find the y-intercept, because our equation is y equals mx plus b, where the slope is m and the y-intercept is b. The y-intercept is negative 2. So I can put that in for b. Now I just find the slope. So I can go 1, 2, 3. I would go up 3. Let me put it here. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. Run 4. So my slope is 3/4. So if it was asking us for the equation, that's how we would find it.